The underdog. The long shot. The nobody from nowhere, never gonna happen 100 to 1 shot. We know something about that. We're with you every step of the way.
Welcome to the Thursday 30. I'm Matt Stradley here with the Jet, John Williams. What a day we have for you. We're joined by Coach Biedenbach and Coach Nick McDevitt, two Asheville coaching legends that have graced us with their time. Coach Biedenbach, first off, thank you so much for making time for us today.
It's always glad to be with you guys, but and also speaking to the folks in Asheville. It was a great time for me there.
And Coach McDevitt, I know you've got a lot going on with your team, Middle Tennessee, right now, and trying to navigate the quarantine while you're doing all those coaching duties. But thank you for setting aside some time for us today.
Absolutely. Glad to do it.
John, these guys look familiar to you?
Oh yeah. They still look good too.
You'll after this whole deal, you'll have some nightmares tonight when you're sleeping. We'll bring up some things that you'll reminded of.
Yeah, I already have some, Coach. Don't worry.
Okay.
They're recurring.
I think it's
All right.
insane that John and I are sitting here with two people who have their own Wikipedia pages. And here I am, a guy who's absolutely finessed his way into having this conversation. It's a brilliant time to be alive. Let's go back. Let's start from the start. You all three got together in Asheville. I'd like to ask Coach Biedenbach and Coach McDevitt, how did you get John to Asheville?
Go ahead, Nick.
No, that one's you. You're that man.
We had a coach by the name of Thomas Nash, was our assistant coach for us, and he was a private school, high school coach, and he's a good coach, and we hired him at Asheville, and he knew all the private schools and knew all about them. I had heard some things about John from his days in Raleigh. I mean, I thought he would end up at NC State, but since he lived in Raleigh, but he played at Word of God and some other schools, and then he went to a private school in Virginia, and he had some academic difficulties. It wasn't. We've had several players that had academic problems. Most of them were similar to John. It wasn't their intelligence or how well they did with their grades. It was because of transferring schools and by the administrations at those schools, guidance counselors not knowing what NCAA rules were. So John came to Asheville, and he was ineligible the first year, but some of the big boys dropped off of him because of that reason. He was allowed to practice with us, but he had to sit out that first year. And that was very, very fortunate for us. I don't think he comes to this school, although I knew his family somewhat through my NC State days. But that's the way that recruiting has to be done. You have to get through some of the rough spots and get some people that really normally wouldn't end up at your school. Is that pretty close, John?
That's fairly close. I don't like to talk about the school a lot, but yes, we had no idea what we were doing at the time at that school. We lost our credibility, and I ended up having to transfer to a school to catch up. And I appreciate you guys for taking a chance on me after all of that was said and done. And but going to that school in Virginia definitely helped me be able to compartmentalize and to be able to transition into college. And so my redshirt year, I thought that it made it a lot easier to adjust to not just basketball, but also just the academic part. And so I thought that year also helped strengthen me to get ready for I would not have to get myself a Big South championship
John, we're missing a little bit of you on the sound.
I think we're getting muted out a little bit, but you're in that man cave again.
I'm not, man. I'm good, man. I'm good.
Okay, you upstairs getting that good Wi-Fi. Okay. Okay. Coach McDevitt, what was one thing that John did that absolutely drove you nuts?
That drove me nuts.
Uh-huh.
Oh man, this is a Thursday 30, right?
Oh yeah. Well, we'll just cut it down to like a 3. If we could do a top 3, that'd be fine. That'd be.
You know, John is a personality, and our team needed that. You know, just thinking back to, you know, we're talking about his recruitment, but it was, you know, just watching his development from an explosive athlete. I mean, you know, we've seen all the things that he can do as far as his leaping ability. I mean, he did it in high school. I remember he sent us a video jumping over a guy, one of his classmates, and about 3 or 4 years later, in a dunk contest, he's jumping over Kenny George, who was, you know, almost 8 feet tall. He's 7'7". That's what we listed him in his bare feet. 7'9" in his shoes, and John had the ability to jump over him. Wow. But he also became a player as well. And I think what, you know, part of what we missed out when he was muted just a second ago was, you know, we did miss him that first year. But because of missing him that first year, we got a 5th year. And that 5th year was the year we won the championship in 2010-11, John's senior year. So you think about the downside of not having an athlete like that when he first walks on campus. But the positive was we were able to win a championship in large part because of him, his 5th year, his senior year. I still remember the game clinching play. It was one of the most athletic plays that I've seen. You know, there's less than a minute to go in the game, and John at the free throw line is just a few feet away from a young man that's taking a last second shot, and he jumps up in the air and catches it with one hand and cups the ball for a blocked shot. It was one of the most explosive. John, there are guys that jump quick and there are guys that jump high, and John did both. He could get up off the floor real quick and real high in a hurry, and that block that sealed the championship in 2010-11 was an incredible play. I haven't seen.
And that was down at Coastal Carolina. Yep. And their coach was very adamant that was goaltending. And, those coaches, so many of them we played against, didn't agree with the officials, and you got to get along with those guys. And I think that's really an important part of maturing as a coach. And I thought that was one of the major things I helped Nick with, because you saw how I did that all the time.
And Nick, best friends with the officials then?
I've got a lot of really good friends that are officials. I don't know if Coach B can say the same thing.
I do. I do remember on several occasions Nick McDevitt having to pull Eddie B back by the waist to come back and just let it be. Let it be.
Well, that was because I think in those few instances, I think they had made a mistake. And all the other times, that was just part of the game.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, those games, conference games, Nick picked out, that's one of the key times and the memorable moments when you see a play like that, when the game's on the line, that so many of our players made. Not as spectacular perhaps as that individual play, but in their own way, even like Alex Craigle stealing the ball against Elon. That was not a big-time jumping, running, doing anything, but it was a spectacular defensive play that gave us a chance that year to win a championship.
Coach McDevitt, who's the best player you've coached at Asheville?
Oof. The best player. There are a lot. There were a lot of really good ones that came through there. I mean, you think back to J.P. Prim and Matt Dickey, some of John's teammates, Andre Smith. The most dominant, obviously, was Kenny George. He just changed the game in ways that people. I mean, John, I'm sure, has been able to share plenty of stories with you. He was a dominant force in college basketball, not just in our league, but being with Coach B for 16 years at Asheville, we had some great players. Josh Pittman is probably the greatest all-around player that I was with at Asheville. He was a senior my freshman year and was two-time Big South player of the year and his senior year. And he was already there when I got there. But as far as an all-around player, he could have played at just about anywhere in the country.
We had several players over that time that were player of the years. Kevin Martin was player of the year after him. And although he wasn't athletic, he was strong. He was like a lot of people you listen to on TV, the great players talking about. He was very determined and played hard every second of the game. And so there's a lot of ways to be a great player. And each one of those individual teams, when you look at them and you look at the record as 20 wins or 18 wins, there's somebody and several on that team that made a difference. Often we didn't have 5, 6, 7, 8 deep like we did some of those years, but often we had 2 or 3 that could really play.
Yeah, the last couple of years we had, that when I was there as the head coach, we had some, obviously great talented players. Andrew Rousey was one of the best scorers really over the last several years in college basketball. He scored over 1,000 points at 2 different schools. Maceo Teague, who'll be finishing up this year at Baylor, was also a great player for us for 2 years. But you got to have guys that are ultra competitors. People use the term dogs now a lot. You got to have some dog in you to win championships, and you got to have a player that really drives that. Kevin Bonata was one of those guys for us over the last couple of years at Asheville, but a guy that really competed every single day was a guy named Dwayne Sutton. He ended up being the MVP of the Big South tournament the year we won it as a freshman, had 25 points and 18 rebounds as a freshman in the championship. And as Coach was alluding to a minute ago, there wasn't just that one spectacular play that young man made in that game, one of those big-time games, but you just watched a young kid at 18 years old go to another level in the second half of that championship game. That you have to have great players that have that in them to win championships.
And I agree with Nick on that regarding Kenny George and just being in a situation where there's absolutely nothing you can physically do to stop that man. I've been able to guard just about every position you can think of, and I've never seen anyone actually stop Kenny George. I mean, everybody's been stopped at some point. I've never seen anyone be actually able to physically stop that man. I mean, refs can stop him, but people cannot, not people that he's playing against. So I would definitely say for me personally, just watching out there, as far as dominating the game, it was Kenny George. Regarding skill and the ability to score in a myriad of different ways. And one of the hardest players on my team that I had to guard was Brian Smitson. He was fast. He was quick. He could pull up from anywhere. He had like infinite range, but also could finish at the basket. He was just a very difficult player to guard one-on-one, but also knew how to pick spots between levels of help side, primary, secondary, and third defenses. So I was a big fan of him as far as one of the players that just well-rounded, developed, and could score, even though he lacked the size.
He was a great physically, quickness-wise, jumping-wise, shooting-wise, and his determination. He was always in great shape. I happened to catch him on the internet, which I usually don't find many strange things because I get confused by those things. But I saw him on the internet, and he's been playing great in Europe for a number of years. And I mean, he was very, very well thought of. He was so good when he played in Europe that I thought he might get a chance at one of the NBA teams one of these days. He's getting a little old now, but I'll tell you, he was that good, and his range was that deep that he could have done that. We also Keith Hornsby transferred that. When Nick talked about Maceo Teague and Sutton and a couple of these other guys, right when I left and Nick took over as the head coach, there was sort of a beginning, actually my last year, beginning of a change in these transfer situations. And the bigger schools were starting to realize with our play against St. John's, Syracuse, a bunch of those schools, Kentucky, Louisville, so a lot of those games, they started to say, hey, these guys are really good. And so Asheville lost about, 6 or 7 great players and 2 or 3 young players that would have become great because of this new transfer stuff. And that was really a shame because, in my opinion, although they played very well at the other schools, they could have been more dominant, more successful, and maybe become the kind of player like John Williams did from his development as a freshman, being counted on daily and each game and each practice trying to get better. That makes a difference than when you're not counted on completely. You know, this, oh, I got to play hard today or someone will take my job. It's a little bit of a difference between that and being counted on. And I thought most of our players were counted on, and they developed like that. I thought several of those guys could have been even better.
You mentioned the Syracuse game. I'd love to talk about the Syracuse game. Is that the one that got away?
Which one?
The Syracuse game?
Well, we played up there my first or second year. Second year with Josh Pittman. And we had him beat there. They had a little guard, or not little, he was about 6'2".
Jason Hart.
Hart.
He's now an assistant coach at Southern Cal.
Yeah, we need to call him and tell him, because he probably thinks they beat us. And but those officials, well, that's right, those officials.
Well, everyone makes mistakes, right, Coach?
Yeah, but that game at Syracuse, we should have won that game, and the officials took it. I remember that was one time. Nick will remember this. I left our bench. That if we're looking at the court, we were seated on the left side. I ran all the way to the foul line on the other end, and got the official and told him, and was complaining that I thought they had miscalculated their call. And so he said, Coach, hey, don't do this. He says, this could cost you. He says, this will cost you a chance to win the game. I said, no. There's only one person in this gym that has a chance to cost us the game, and he just made that last call. And but they made 3 or 4 calls at the end up there, and but he didn't call a technical on me, and I was at the other foul line. Is that correct, Nick?
You were way out there. You were well across half court.
Nick, you're supposed to grab him by the hips. What happened?
I was a freshman.
Oh.
That was the very first game of my college career. Very first game was at the Carrier Dome playing Syracuse, and I still remember that game. They had a young man, Ryan Blackwell, that was really good for him that year. Todd Bergen was a good player for him. Jason Hart. We ended up losing in that game. And I knew then, like, that was the first time, you know, I'd seen Josh play as a senior in high school, his junior year, Josh Pittman. I'd seen him play at the Justice Center and seen how good he was and knew how good he was from playing pickup and in practice leading up to the season starting. But, man, when the lights came on in that opening game against Syracuse, and those were household name guys, and Syracuse is a household name program, to watch him be the best player on the floor, and it really I'm not sure it was close. At least that night it wasn't.
He had a great game. He was hard to guard. But they fouled him late in the game on a jump shot. We had trouble getting the shot, but they fouled him and they didn't call it. And then then they made a layup taken without dribbling. And the same guy carrying the ball. It wasn't. But anyway, that's kind of set the stage for 15 years later when we played him in the NCAA tournament. And even though I can give you the names of the officials in those two games, they really didn't bother me that much. No, those are games that you never forget. I go to coffee here with a bunch of guys and we talk about things like this. And every once in a while I get a little out of order. They bring me a coffee cup with a Syracuse name on it. And so people, when they want to get me, they bring that up. So I figured that's what you wanted to do today.
Let's bring it back around. John wants to talk about Auburn.
Yeah, like let's go back to that game. That was a fun game for me. I talked to Matt about this a lot. One of the funnest games that I've had as far as upsetting somebody on their home floor. At first, it was South Carolina because we were able to go in there and do that. But Auburn had a different feel to it just because it was that opening day that had the eagle flying all over the place. Cam Newton was in there. I'm in there like, man, they have no idea that we're about to it's about to be upset city. I really enjoyed that game. I enjoyed being the hated team. We kind of came in there as the team that was supposed to be, the rug you wipe your feet on to get ready for the season. And I feel that, that was just one of my favorite games as a dog, to be able to go in somewhere where the lights are on, where everybody's counting against you, and then come out with a win.
Great game. Yeah. That game also was a few years earlier than that. We had Auburn beat down there, and Billy Allen was driving the baseline, and they just pushed him out of bounds. He was going in to dunk. They just pushed him out of bounds, and the official says, "He's out." It's out of bounds. I guess he was. I didn't agree with that one. They cost us the game down there. But so when John's team came back and beat them, that was very satisfying to me, although they had a different coach that time than they did before. So that was those big wins like that are really something. You remember that South Carolina game, John?
I do. That was fun.
We that game, there was, I don't know if John and Nick will remember this guy, but Howie Garfinkel was the recruiting guru in New York back when I was playing. He and Everett Case were right hand. They were big time buddies. He sent players to NC State back then. Then he switched to Tennessee. But he was at that game. He ran the 5-star camp with U.B. Brown and Mike Fratello, Patino, all. But anyway, each of his offices, guys are starting to get dressed. And Howie asked me about John about Kenny George. And I said, he's really big, and he's starting to learn how to play. His coordination is starting to come. And then Dave Odom, who is really a good buddy of mine, he looked at Howie and, he said, well, I'll tell you, Howie, he's usually a factor, but he's not a player. He's not a basketball player. He's just a factor. And so that really burned my tail. And so I go back to the locker room after leaving there, and the only guy in the locker room was Kenny, because he didn't go out and warm up before the game. He needed all his energy for the game. So he was still sitting in there, and I told Kenny, I said, listen, I just talked to the other coach, and he said you were a factor, but you weren't a player. And, I could tell that got under his skin a little bit. But anyway, late in the game, it was 1 point up and down the whole game. And with about 3 minutes to go, we were up, I forget how many, but they made 3 3-pointers in a row, or 2 3-pointers and a 2 in a row, and we were down 8. Excuse me?
Downey.
Yeah. But anyway, so with, and I'll tell you what, all this work, and we really played well. The guys did what they're supposed to do. And I went, it just took the wind out of me. And there's timeout. And, I didn't quite know what to say. Nick took over, Brett took over, those guys took over and said the right things. Come on, we got to keep battling, keep fighting. Anyway, Kenny, we were down 7. He scored the last 8 points of the game. Turnaround left-handed dunk, a couple of free throws. He made the last 8 points, and they missed a shot at the end. In fact, I think he blocked it. And so he was a great factor that night. I was so happy after that particular game. So,
Did you just call him a factor?
He was a great factor or player.
He was a great player that night, right, Coach? Yeah.
No, that was a play on where it was. I did say he was a great factor that particular night, and but that was the last year for that coach down there. So,
Yeah, Dave was out of there after that because that was a guarantee.
yeah, we got a lot of money for that game, and they were called guarantee games, and they're usually supposed to be a guarantee win for the home team. But guys like John and Kenny George and Josh Pittman made that a non-factor.
There you go. Hey, Coach, I got a question for you.
Sure.
You remember we went up to Virginia Tech, and we battled them hard. Remember Kenny, we did not have Kenny that game. Would you say do you think we beat Virginia Tech if we have Kenny in that game?
That's not, Nick, when you were playing, right?
No.
No, we played them up there, and I thought you were going to ask about that game because we had the wrong guy take the shots, although I didn't assign that to him in the game Nick played in. But the Virginia Tech game when Kenny didn't play, John, I can't remember the possibilities in that game.
You remember?
No.
Yeah, it was a fairly close game. I can't remember as an athlete. His last name was Washington.
Duran, yeah.
Yeah, that I thought we played well. I mean, anytime you miss somebody that's as dominant as Kenny was, and the game was as close as it was, you'd like to hit the rewind button and go back and have him with you. I think we'd have had a shot. Would we have won? I don't know, but it was about a 3-point game with about 7 or 8 to go. I think we were down 44-41 with about at the under 8 media, and we just didn't have enough gas at the end. Like the deal with the South Carolina game. When you've got somebody like Kenny that unless something crazy happens, it's hard to stop a guy like that. He can single-handedly win the game for you, and you just don't have that without him.
John, was that Kenny's junior year at Virginia Tech?
It might have been his sophomore year, Coach.
Yeah, I'm remembering more now, and I'm not sure that the first game he played for us was at Virginia, and as a sophomore, he was supposed to play a couple of home games, and he said he wasn't ready. So anyway, but it was on the road at Virginia. Was the first one. It was the Virginia Tech game before. I think Virginia was like the first or second or third game.
That's correct.
But I don't know why he didn't play. I know the one that was really great during that year was at VMI, and let me see who the two guards.
KJ Garland and Brian Smitson.
Brian Smitson and KJ Garland were our guards, right? And I told Kenny on the bus on the way up, they pressed all night long that he wasn't going to play. But I said, I might have to stick you in at one time or another. So I said, you be in the game the whole time. I mean, timeouts, you get around the guy, you stay close, you be in that game because we may have to use you. And so anyway, we ended up tied 87-all at the end of regulation. So then in overtime, with 11 seconds to go, they score, and we take a shot, and we kick it out of, or they kick it out of bounds. So we have it out of bounds with 11 seconds under their basket. And so KJ Garland and Kenny, I looked at both of them, and they both wanted him to go in. He wanted to go in, and so he hadn't played for, what's that, Nick?
A couple hours.
44
minutes off the clock,
89.
but a couple of hours off your watch. He's been sitting there watching.
Yeah. So anyway, we put him in, and I told the officials I want a timeout after he scores, because Nick and Brett and I had designed this great play, out of bounds play. We put Kenny right in the middle of the lane in front of the basket. We lobbed it up, and he caught it and dunked it.
Genius. It's brilliant. What are you going to do to stop it?
Yeah, nobody ever did that before. They always put guys on the side and screened across or something clever. And Kenny wasn't that mobile at that time, so we just put him in the middle. They all got around him, and they threw it up in the air. He caught it and dunked it. And so we go up one, and I call timeout. KJ called timeout, and the official doesn't call it. He won't call it. They take it out, and they fly up the court and take a shot. And fortunately, they didn't make it, and I called timeout. I had to go past half court that time also to get a timeout. But anyway, we end up winning the game. And the funniest part, though, was after the game, go to the locker room, and all the reporters have Kenny outside. Smitson and Garland got 31 and 34 points each. And they're all talking to Kenny, who played 5 seconds. They were all around him. Those two guys were bad. I said, don't worry about it. So that was a great win for us, though.
Coach McDevitt, what's your best memory from Asheville? And I know you got a lot to choose from. You spent a lot of time in Asheville. You played in Asheville. You were assistant coach in Asheville. You're head coach in Asheville. Between you and Eddie, you make up almost 2 decades of basketball history here in your hometown. And the shape of that basketball is today in Asheville is due to you two gentlemen and extremely large part. And that's got to be a pretty great feeling. Of your 2 decades with the Bulldogs, what's some of your best memories?
Man, that's a tough question. There are several moments that stand out over that period of time for me. One was before I even got there, watching, the team, the years that, like, the Asheville UNC Greensboro rivalry before Greensboro went to the SoCon was a good one. And I remember going to one of the games as a recruit to the Justice Center and the place was just alive and loud. And then, seeing them in the Civic Center playing North Carolina was something that, just sticks out for me, because at that time I was 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, and you're seeing Asheville, battle a great team to the wire, hosting North Carolina in Kimmel Arena as the opener of the season in 2011-12. And at that time, they're the number one team in the country. And so you're hosting at UNC Asheville, the number one team in the country, the Tar Heels. And we played well. We were right there with them at halftime. They pulled away late, but just watching the program grow from, where it was in the mid-late 90s. Coach Biedenbach took over, and 15 years later, you're winning back-to-back championships and hosting the number one team in the country on your home floor in front of in a brand new 3,500 seat arena. That took a lot of hard work, and Coach Biedenbach put in a lot of hard work over his time at Asheville, and just grew the program into what it is today. That's not easy. When I got to Asheville in 1997 in the Justice Center, the side goals had wooden backboards, and there was no square. There wasn't even a painted square behind the rims on the side goals. And in 15 years, we have a $40 million facility in hosting the Tar Heels. That I think that just, you think about those two things and how much work that took over 15 years. And Coach Bees was captaining and leading that the whole time. But I'd be remiss. The ones that stick out are, when you put a ring on your finger, those championship moments. 2003, you win it and go to the NCAA tournament for the first time. We upset Winthrop, who had won several in a row in the semifinals. And then we beat one of our rivals in Radford in 2003 for that first trip. And, you just that kind of catapulted for what was to come down the road.
Nick was a lot longer there. He had a great high school career. He and one of our other players were local players that had a lot of attention back when he was in high school, and both of those young men had great grades and came. But Nick mentioned something I think that was significant. All of these people, I think you're only as successful as the people around you want to be. You want to surround yourself with as many as those kind. And at Asheville, it was a very academic school, and there were some people that weren't really basketball fans. They wanted the players to do well. They wanted our students to do well, but they weren't basketball fans, like you would normally have at some of the ACC schools or some of the places. But that freshman year, we went to Greensboro to play, and they had two big guys. They had won the championship the year before, and they had a guy named Cherry, and I can't remember the other big guy's name. But we played them tough, and at halftime we were getting our tails kicked a little bit, and we're going to the locker room, and Nick blew his corker as a player, jumping on two of our players who were messing around on the bench. I didn't see it. I was on the game. They were coming off the court, and I don't know what happened. I never did ask, but I knew then that that's the leadership you got to have within the team. You can't. I'm not around all the time. I was there, but you can't be around them at night, and we're in the locker room and here and there. But I knew then that within the team we had the makeup of guys that could win championships for us. In that particular game, we threw a surprise press on them late in the game. It was one of those 1 point up, 1 point down games. Cherry took the ball out of bounds after we scored, and he turned around and we pressed him, and he stepped on the line. And that official saw it. It was amazing. And he called it. So, but anyway, we got the ball and we scored and we ended up winning that. And that was a big win for us because they were good. They were favored to win the league that year. And I'm not sure if we were better or not, but we were a couple of points better that night. And that was, and that, those are the kind of things that I remember very well about young people. You know, that a lot of times you think you give them advice, you give them guidance, but a lot of times it comes from their parents and their background, and that, and then the things you say maybe will make a difference. But thanks for doing that, Nick.
I'm lucky to be sitting here with actually three fantastic coaches. John, the state championship winning coach this past season. I have a coaching question. As casual fans, as people who have maybe coached 5 and 6 year olds, second and third graders, I don't know that the casual fan knows what all goes into coaching. I'm going to ask each of you, starting with John, then Nick, and then Eddie. What is one thing that the casual fan may not know that is the toughest thing about coaching?
I would definitely say the buy-in part, establishing the culture, the vision, and having everybody on the same page when it comes to that. I've been a part of some really good teams at UNC Asheville, and a lot of those and several of those teams did not win. That wasn't our most talented team, but the team that I was a part of that ended up winning the Big South Conference Championship was the team that had bought fully in to the vision and the scope that our coaches had laid forth, but also made it our own. And for me, that's been how I've been able to, as a coach myself now, motivate, encourage, and create a vision for my players to be able to buy in. And even though we weren't the most talented team, because we played together at that point, we were able to get ourselves a championship. And so for that same being, like, that's something that I took from my coaches, and I took the blueprint and kind of went forward with that. And that's what's helped me become successful in what I'm trying to do as a coach, but then also the relationships that you build with those players, they last a lifetime. And so those are those things that have been big for me in transitioning from playing to coaching in early success.
Yeah, to build on what John said, I think, being connected as a group is very difficult to do because a lot of players at the collegiate level want to go on and play at the professional level. They have dreams and aspirations of playing in the NBA, and sometimes there can be, not necessarily because of self-serving on their own part, but by those that are around them, that they can start looking out for themselves at times. You see that on some of the great teams. If you have that in your organization, you need to have, and Coach B used to tell our teams this all the time, then you better be the most talented. And that's not going to be the case for almost every team at any level. You're not going to be the most talented. So you have to have talent. In order, and this is something I tell my staff still today, that Coach B told us as players, and particularly told us as his assistants when I was at Asheville. If you're going to win the national championship, you better have 3 draft picks on your roster. At some of the lower levels, if you're going to win a conference championship, you better have 3 all-conference players on your roster. And getting 3 all-conference players or 3 draft picks to be like this, that's hard. It's a challenge. And I would also say a thing that is challenging that's off the court, and this is something that I thought I learned early in my coaching career from Coach B, because I didn't always think this way, but I changed to think this way, was that how you discipline and treat people off the court. And it's going to be different for every player. You know, there are a lot of coaches and there are a lot of different ways to do it. But here are our team rules, and here are the consequence for breaking each particular rule. But Coach B didn't do it that way. And as a result, now that I'm a head coach, I think the same way. You know, we tell our players, our job is not to treat you the same, it's to treat you fair. Because everybody's not the same. You can look at players and see there are different sizes, heights, weights, abilities, athleticism. So you hold them to a different standard in different areas on the court. You know, you don't hold your 6'10" athletic center to the same standard of rebounding as you do your small 5'10" point guard. You hold them, they have different abilities. They also have just as different backgrounds off the court. They have different academic backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. So the decisions they make both on and off the court have different repercussions. You may have some kid that gets a B in a class and you want to whip his tail because he's got the ability to get an A. Whereas a different kid in the same class gets a C and you celebrate it. And he outperformed what his background says he otherwise should have. And getting young people to understand, why is he mad at me for getting a B and he's celebrating this guy for getting a C in the same class? Because they come from very different backgrounds. And that was something I think I was fortunate to be around Coach B early in my coaching career to learn that because most people just, if he breaks that rule, we're running a mile. And if I break the same rule, we're running a mile. And you have to have those standards, but at the same time, you have to have a feel and an understanding for young people. And I think that's why Coach, was in the business for the better part of 4+ decades, not just because of understanding basketball, but he understood people. You think about how people changed from the early 70s, young people, culture, from the early 70s to 2012 to 2015 when he was still coaching. That's a big time span. And to understand young people and how they tick and what makes them work and be willing to change, I think is, a testament to who he is, but also how he understands people.
If we're going to continue with the same line of what maybe the average fan doesn't know, when they watch the game, they see athleticism, jump shots, the ball going in the basket, and the average fan, I don't think, understands percentages of taking good shots, playing the game right. One thing that I always said, that you don't shoot your way back into a game. You don't shoot your way to win a game. You play the game right and then make some shots. And I was fortunate enough to be with some great players, great teams like at NC State early in my career, and have guys like Norm Sloan and Sam Esposito. Sam was the assistant coach. Great player. And understanding that playing the game right gets you to win, puts percentages on your side, because you live and die with jump shots. It's changed a little bit with a 3-point shot that takes a little of that away. But the thing that I think is the most different to win on a consistent basis is a little bit what Nick said in the way of playing together, the team getting in, what John said, of getting the team to be a team and back each other up and depend on each other on and off the court. But an example of that, I think, was back with we played Charleston Southern at home in a game. Same year we went to play in the tournament at the
Coastal?
Yeah, no, we played a tournament in
the Bahamas.
When we went to the Bahamas that same year, that was a very good payoff, and I didn't even spend 1 cent in the casino. but I earned that right to do that, but I didn't. And we got a great payout for that, and it was a great experience for our guys. But we played Connecticut down there and played well enough that scared them a little bit. They made some threes that got them a win in the game, and they earned it. It wasn't anything odd in the game. But however, then late in the year, near the last game of the season, either the last game or next to the last, we played Charleston Southern at home, and they had a great team. And they beat us. We were first, second, or third for about 3 weeks in scoring the most points per game. We were averaging over 90 points a game. Carolina was averaging over 90, and BMI was averaging over 90. And we started to, we stopped playing great defense and tried to outscore our opponents. And I was telling them, but it wasn't getting anywhere because we were beating everybody. And so we get beat at Charleston Southern in Asheville. And they had a little guard that was really hard to guard.
Son Emily.
Yeah.
He's an assistant coach there now.
Is he? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He can't shoot from the bench. So he was a great shooter. But anyway, they beat us. And I hated that. I mean, that game bugged me more than any. And Brett and we had a new coach.
Dion Dacons.
And the two of them got a tape of the Connecticut game out and the tape of the
Charleston
Southern game. And they found very similar plays. On the Connecticut game, we dove an extra 2 feet to get a hand on the ball and didn't necessarily get it. And in the Charleston Southern, we reached for a ball. We just all kinds of little things like that. And there must have been 20 clips. And the general statement was, if you guys are going to win, you got to play like you played against Connecticut every night. And not like you've been playing these last 8 games to try to score the most points. We were good enough that we could beat those teams, but Charleston Southern snuck up on us. Anyway, we won the tournament that year at home, and we beat everybody by double digits. I think 17 was the closest anybody came to us. And then we went on. But how that team played at that point on was a real learning lesson for not only the players, but for all of our coaches and for me included. And that was the ways down the road. I've been coaching a long time. But that's the difference, I think, that fans don't realize, how you put percentages on your side throughout a game, taking the shots, which is the hardest thing to teach, shot selection. John Williams wanted to shoot jump shots as a freshman, and Nick and Brett didn't want him to shoot jump shots. I was okay with it.
Of course, yeah.
But anyway, I thought that was great. And John, you and Nick, I think you made great points on that same point, but and that's why you're good coaches now.
I asked that question the way I asked that question because in watching Nick coach and seeing John coach, I can see some things that John got from Nick, and it's pretty clear. And watching the way Nick coaches, and then watching the way Coach Biedenbach coaches, I can see where Nick's gotten some of the things that he does. And I think just watching sort of the progression of knowledge through these 3 fantastic coaches, for me personally, selfishly, has been just a joy over the last 20 years. So thank you all 3 of you for that. It's been as a Asheville observer, just brilliant.
Well, you're kind to say that. It's times like this that Nick and John will appreciate 20 years down the road when you got them and the next 2 coaches or the next 2 players. I know I still talk to my high school coach, He's 89 years old, be 90 this year. He played at Penn State and was a great coach. Had a lot to do with attitude and effort. Was the main thing that he taught me. And I call him and I don't think he ever talked to me in high school other than what to do, but he meant a whole lot to me. And I appreciate these guys as well as I do so many of the other players. And they're going to be just like that down the road too.
And that's big, Coach. We greatly appreciate it. That attitude and effort thing definitely stuck. It's what I use now to this day as far as a precursor to how we're going to play or how we're going to go out there in our games. And but also, the fact, and both of you guys did this for me when I was coming up, showing me that you cared, which is how I was able to take being coached hard and being pushed past my comfort zone, to be able to bump heads with you and understand that we're bumping heads out of love. We're not bumping heads because we hate each other. We're doing it because we're trying to reach a common goal. I really appreciate all the knowledge and wisdom that you guys have passed on to me now, and it's definitely carried on to me as a husband, a father, as a coach. And so I just want to let you guys know how much I appreciate you guys and what you guys did for me and my development. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. You're getting kids at an age range where they're trying to find themselves and transitioning into the real world. And you guys did a fantastic job with not just me, but we just got off a Zoom call with all of the alum that won that 2011-2010 championship. And, it was nothing but laughs and hugs. And it's always awesome to see how everybody's progressing in life. You guys were the catalyst of that. And so I just want to let you guys know how much I appreciate you and I love you, and wouldn't be where I am without you. So I just wanted to say thank you.
What is Zoom?
Oh man, that's the best. I'll kind of echo with what John just said real quick, Matt. I've taken a lot of things that I learned from Coach B into my responsibilities as a head coach both at Asheville and here at Middle Tennessee. Talking about effort and attitude, those are two words that we heard daily. I heard them every day for 16 years from Coach. And that's because you can control it. You can get up every day and control your effort and your attitude. And so our core values here at Middle, we use the acronym TEAMS for our 5 core values. We talk about toughness, effort, attitude, motives, and being servant leaders. But that E and the A of your effort and your attitude, we heard it every day, and it's up on our locker room walls, and we talk about them here daily because I saw what that meant, as Coach talked about a minute ago, between the difference in that UConn game and the Charleston Southern game. It was their effort and their attitude towards the game that was the difference in being a championship team or getting beat on your home court by a lesser opponent. And that's no knock on who Charleston Southern was that year, but we were a championship team, and 2 freshman guards, Saw Nimley and Arlen Harper, came into our building, and they whipped us. And that was because of our effort and our attitude. We lost 2 games that year at home to North Carolina, the number 1 team in the country, and Charleston Southern. And our attitudes were different late. We got an attitude adjustment because of that game. And I really think had we not lost that game, we might not have won the championship. But we lost it. We had to adjust our thinking and ended up winning. And, that your effort and your attitude in your approach is really important. And I think they're really important in times like this. You're really quarantined at home. You're supposed to stay at home, and it's not easy. And if your attitude towards that is woe is me, then you're going to come out of this worse off. Or you can take advantage of sharing ideas like, it sounds like John is doing with some of his former teammates. And honestly, just being on this call here, starts to, it got some ideas flowing in my head for some things that we need to share with our team. So I think your effort and your attitude in every situation is key.
Hey,
And
Nick, do you
up at
guys
Middle
use,
Tennessee. Go ahead, John.
Nick, do you guys use any terminology like popcorn poppers? Do you use Suzy Q?
Think and
Any of
do.
that? Do you use that?
Well, I haven't used the popcorn popping in a while.
Okay.
I haven't used that one.
Okay.
That's very profound. I mean, the movie doesn't start until the popcorn's popping. When the popcorn, it's game time.
Hey, Nick, up at Middle Tennessee, do they have any Ingles markets up there near you?
No Ingles.
How do you get produce at all? It's crazy.
The thing I miss a lot about Ingles is I thought they had the best guacamole.
Yeah.
They make it in-house, and I love guacamole. And my wife and I, we would buy it by the tubfuls. And I miss Ingles guacamole.
We'll see if we can get some up there to you. This Thursday 30 is sponsored by Ingles Markets. Low prices love the savings. John and I have been very vocal in our support and suggestions about their produce department, and they've done some really amazing things with their produce.
They have. I've requested several exotic fruits, and they've stepped up to the challenge that I did not think they would, and they have. And so big shout out to Ingles for going above and beyond the call.
This is what happens when you let John play basketball in Ecuador and he eats a fruit. Now he wants it all the time.
He's an eclectic young man.
John is always going to take the high road. He's going to do that. But listen, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. You guys are great. Thanks for putting it together. And how many of these do you do? How many of these podcasts like this? How many do you do?
This will be our second one. We had Coach Morrell on the first one, and so we thought we'd just see the rest of the coaching tree for the last quarter century for Asheville. And between that conversation and this conversation, I mean, if you take your 2 hours and listen to it, you have a lot of fun. But man, you learn so much about basketball and coaching and philosophies and what it comes to. I'm fired up for that sport to come back, honestly.
Well, Mike's done a good job there with the recruits that he's had. He's in a real tough situation from the standpoint of these new transfer rules and with the quarantine and all those kind of things. But one thing he does have is a great city in Asheville, one that I know Nick misses. John, you're fortunate enough to be there. It's one of the best towns I've ever lived in, and as far as weather and the eclectic, everything about it, it's great. And he also has that new arena, the Sherrill Center. Those two things really helped Nick in his recruiting, really helped me in my recruiting, and it should help Mike. I think with all sophomores coming back as starters, he did a good job last year, and I think that Asheville can progress. It's going to be tough, though, with this transfer rule. I don't know how they're going to do that. You can go to a school one time and not sit out. But that's what one thing Nick said, change is really important. And change is going to happen. If you don't adjust to it, then you make a mistake. And change is usually good. I used to say change is always good. The times are going to change. But some of these rules and everything, they make it really tough on you. But the dollars and cents are making the big schools change, and everybody has to fall in place. So it's going to be a very interesting few years.
Well, Coach Biedenbach, Coach McDevitt, and Coach Williams, I'll go ahead and say that, the Jet, John. Three of Asheville's most beloved basketball figures, and we were lucky enough to have them all together for this one Thursday 30. That's been brought to you by Ingles Markets. Coach Biedenbach, Coach McDevitt, thank you so much for your time. Jet, it's always fun, man.